So, because we don't have an official speaker today, or somebody, presenting something, we thought it would be nice if we tried to cover the 12 days of Christmas by doing something with everybody here. So, everybody, a lot of the Welsh people who grew up in Wales, have done a memory, short Christmas memory. And some are not here, so other people are going to read for them. I'm going to start off with something that's not Welsh, it's Shakespeare's. But I think it'll set the tone, even though it's very warm today. It's snowy outside, and I always love this Shakespearean poem called When Icicles Hang by the Wall, A Winter's Tale. So try and remember, or try and think that you're freezing cold, okay? When icicles hang by the wall, and Dick the shepherd throws his nail, and Tom bears logs into the hall, and milk comes frozen home in pail. When blood is nipped and ways be foul, then nightly sings the staring owl, twit-doo, a merry note, while greasy Joan doth keel the pot. When all aloud the wind doth blow, and coughing drowns the parson's saw, and birds sit brooding in the snow, and Marion's nose is red and raw. When roasted crabs hiss in the bowl, then nightly sings the staring owl, twit-doo, a merry note, while greasy Joan doth keel the pot. So, hope that puts you in the wintry mood. So we have the first Christmas memory will be by Glyn Dowden.
Yep. I know you.
I know you.
Can you hear me all right? Yeah? Christmas at my house. Wait, I can't wait. It's almost Christmas. Nearly there, pink and yellow, some red, paper trimmings from corner to corner, silver tinsel, balloons and bells hanging from the ceiling under the mistletoe. Give us a kiss, it's almost Christmas. I always wanted a Christmas tree. We never had a Christmas tree. Too much bother. Or was it the cost? I don't know. My mother was practical, and my father unconcerned. Christmas Eve upstairs on a double-decker bus with our dad, who is smoking. He's always smoking. We're going to town, my sister and me, to buy our books. Looking down, you can see houses with lights and blinking trees in their windows passing by, and people bustling with parcels and shopping bags passing by, and the Salvation Army on corners singing carols. Fat blokes with red cheeks blowing trumpets, while a stern grey-haired lady wearing glasses and a black uniform with silver buttons is ringing a bell, begging for money. Everyone's smiling and occasionally hollering. After all, give us a kiss. It's Christmas. Last year, I chose Treasure Island, but this year, I choose Buffalo Bill. Then it's off to the market, where you can smell dried blood from the open butcher's counters, mingling with sawdust on the floor. And we sit on a wooden bench at the back of a shop to eat faggots and peas, while my father chews on pig's trotters. In the evening, my parents go out to a working men's club. My mother leaves my sister and I, each with a bag of sweets, and our overwhelming, restless frustration, desperately excited, waiting for the next day, Christmas. We read out new books, play games and argue, until finally, taking ourselves to bed, we say to each other, "Don't go to sleep." Next thing I know, my sister is shaking me. He's been. It's into our parents' bedroom we go, yelling, he's been, look, and hold up our stockings. We never noticed that they looked like my mother's nylon stockings. They were packed with, let's see, an orange? Not sure about that. Bag of toffees, gobstoppers, playing cards, a comb and toothbrush. Don't want them. Mars bar, Jack stars and marbles. Quick, the living room. A fort, wow, and lead soldiers. All at that moment, everything's forgotten. I'm down on the floor making up stories. Soldiers marching, attacking, and being shot. Come back to life, marching back, do it again. Wait, there's a jigsaw puzzle. Pen and paper, slippers and a pair of socks. I didn't know Santa brought socks. I'm not sure how many sweets my sister can stuff into her mouth at the same time. It's a lot. She's older than me, but I like to tease her. I take my time eating my sweets and chocolate, knowing that she'll have scoffed down hers before dinner and will want to share mine. No way, I say, and she throws a tantrum. Christmas Day is well on its way when my father says, "Give him a drop, it won't hurt." And I pretend to like eggnog, but what I really like is sweet sherry. Then it's dinner, goose and stuffing with roast potatoes, and me trying to avoid eating cabbage. I hate cabbage. Tea time rolls around and there's still room for jelly and blancmange and the Christmas cake. I hate the taste of marzipan. Why did she have to use marzipan? My sister finds sixpence in the fruit pudding. I'm jealous, kick up a fuss and say it's not fair. Today my father isn't drunk. That will hold over until Boxing Day, a time to celebrate and put Christmas behind you. He will stagger home from the pub, eat the leftovers and go to bed for an afternoon nap, while I complete my jigsaw puzzle, crack some walnuts, and my sister does something with dolls. Once more, in hopeful anticipation, I look out of the window. But it hasn't snowed. Never mind, maybe next year, Mum says.
And our next reader is Susan Davies Sit, who's going to read Christmas and the PLYGAIN.
Christmas on the PLYGAIN in Dolgellau in 1850. Now is the appointed morning. Just after 5, the church bells ring out, the sound of many feet and laughs and shouts are heard in the streets. Now come into town from miles and miles around, for our parish is 13 or 14 miles long. Old and young, churchmen and dissenters. Oh, the blessed day of peace, for even theology throws off its rancors for the PLYGAIN. Now the church is in a blaze, now crammed, body, aisle, gallery. Now Sean Roberts, the club-footed shoemaker, and his wife descending from the singing seat to the lower and front part of the gallery, strike up alternately and without artificial aid of pitch pipe, the long, long carol and the old favourite describing the worship of kings and of the wise men, and the flight into Egypt and the terrible wickedness of Herod. The crowds are wholly silent and wrapped in admiration. Then the good rector and his curate, David Pugh, stand up and read the morning service, abbreviated, finishing with a prayer for all conditions of men. And the benediction, restless and somewhat surging, is the congregation during prayers. The rector obliged sometimes to stop short in his office and look directly at some part or persons. but no verbal admonishment. Prayers over, the singers begin again more carols, new singers, old carols, in solos, duets, trios, choruses, then silence in the audience, broken at appropriate pauses by the suppressed hum of delight and approval, till between 8 and 9, hunger telling on the singers, the PLYGAIN is over, and the bells strike out a round peal. The oat cakes in the browns, the swig, the strong ale, the cakes, the cold meats are soon being ravenously devoured at Dr. Williams's, and all his neighbours' houses far and wide, the young ones afterwards going to football and ball playing, and other ones criticising the carols till church time, and dinner come around, when feasting finishes the day.
Thank you, Susan. So now we have Jane Morgan. Jane's going to read Christmas Food, which I've had enough today.
Hello, everybody.
Hello, Jane.
Okay, so these aren't my memories. Somebody wrote these for me. Who wrote this? Do you recall? It is not, I'm not a member here. No. Okay. So these are traditional Welsh Christmas foods. My most profound memory of Christmas Welsh foods was the Terry's chocolate orange I used to get in the bottom of my stocking. Anyway. Turkey was not part of the Christmas fair in the rural areas until the second half of the 20th century. Goose has been the festive bird associated with Christmas in Wales over the centuries. Since the late medieval times, the yeoman farmer had a goose on his Christmas table. Many farmers would give one as a gift to tenants and workmen to celebrate Michaelmas Day, but a fair number would be reserved and fattened for the Christmas market. Plum pudding, well fruited and spiced, has been associated with Christmas since the early 18th century. The mixture was bunched together and tied securely with strong cord to form a bag. The bag was then suspended from a stick placed across the top of a cauldron or boiler and immersed in boiling water. It was served with a sweet butter sauce. Mixing the Christmas pudding involves the whole family, when each member, from the youngest to the oldest, would take his turn to stir the pudding, and in doing so would cast a secret wish. It was a common custom also, when preparing the pudding, to put small coins in the mixture, the old silver threepenny or sixpenny pennies, and the lucky recipient on Christmas Day regarded them as tokens of good luck. So my nine for years would save, she had a whole stash of sixpennies, and she would hide them and only use them at Christmas time. I remember that very clearly. Loaf cake was synonymous with Christmas celebrations in the industrial valleys of South Wales. I've never had loaf cake. I come from the north. I'm a gog, but any of you from teas from the south, do you remember loaf cakes? I don't.
No, we
No. The dough prepared in large quantities would be carried to the local bakehouse, where the baker would be responsible for baking the cakes for a penny or two per loaf. Neighbors were invited to taste each other's cakes, and tradition has it that if a young maid was given the opportunity to taste 13 different cakes in one season, she would marry before the following Christmas. Thank you.
And for our next reader, Rodgers. And this is going to be about, I don't know if a lot of you, a couple of years ago, saw the Mary Lwyd that we had here. So she's going to read about Mary Lwyd of South Wales.
The Mary Lwyd. The Mary Lwyd, literally Grey Mary of South Wales, which is probably the best known of these customs, belongs to the Christmas season and the New Year. It consisted of taking from door to door a horse's skull covered with a white sheet and decorated with colorful ribbons. This was carried by a man concealed under the sheet who would operate the jaw and make it snap. The party, usually dressed up as Sergeant, Merryman, Punch, and Judy, led the Mari to the door of the house and engaged in a poetic contest, usually singing as many as 15 verses before they were eventually allowed to enter. The Mari, on entering the house, would run wildly after the girls, snapping at them with its jaws, until the time came to enjoy the food and drink offered in plenty. The origin of this custom has been variously explained. It was, however, clearly a form of wassailing, and one of the elaborate earthenware wassail bowls made at the WSWNE pottery in the Vale of Glamorgan was often carried around by the LWYD party, as well as by other wassailers in the district who did not take the horse's head with them on their visits.
Thank you. I went a little out of turn there. I missed Lowri. And Lowri's going to read a Christmas memory by a neighbor of mine who is actually, we ended up in the same place. We didn't know each other before, but we come from 2 towns away in Wales. So this was Peta Morgan Shepherd's Welsh Christmas.
Thank you. So this is an interesting story, and it reminds me of the stories that, this is an interesting story, and it reminds me of the stories that my mother and father would tell about their families. Okay, so this is Welsh Christmas, and it's from a South Wales seaside town. And her name is Peta Morgan Shepherd. Peta. Okay. When I was growing up in Porthcawl, we routinely spent Christmas Day with my paternal grandmother in Pontypridd. My Nana Morgan was a lovely lady who was shy and quiet and completely overshadowed by her sister, with whom she lived her whole life, Auntie Gag. My father's childish version of her name, Margaret, or Mags to her family, was the eldest of the family of 12. She had been a nurse and was extremely proud of her claim that she had been, quote unquote, made in America. The story goes that her father, my great-grandfather, had emigrated to the US as a young man and had made it to Kansas. He had worked on a farm, and the farmer, it was said, had loved him like a son and promised that he would inherit this farm, as he had no sons of his own. After a few years of being there, he sent for his girlfriend, wife, we're not sure. Now the trip was grueling in those days, but the young girl from the valleys came to join her love. They stayed and worked on the farm for a while, but when the young wife became pregnant, she was so terribly homesick, and she had to return to Clairvale to be with her man and the rest of her family. And so ended my great-grandfather's dream of a better life on a farm in Kansas, and he headed back to Wales in the life of a miner. The child she bore was my great-aunt, hence made in America. So Christmas Day began for me by waking up to feel the heavy weight of a stocking on my feet. This was the highlight of the day for me. Sleepy-eyed and tousled, I would unpack the small parcels filled with delight of all tiny presents. There would be a small orange and nuts, together with some sweets and chocolates, all of which were fair game on Christmas morning. I remember the distinct frustration of trying to get the small wrapped presents out of that net stocking. They would get caught up and have to be carefully and painstakingly extricated before being unwrapped and examined thoroughly before moving on to the next treasure. This took a long, delicious hour or so, giving my parents a much-needed lie-in. Then we would all wash and dress and head to Ponty, bearing presents for my grandmother, her sister, and ourselves. The formalities had to be observed before a single gift could be opened. So frustrating for a young child. So Christmas lunch would be cooked and eaten with a certain alacrity so that the high point of the day could be reached. The grand opening of the presents. Inevitably, I would be overwhelmed and spoiled. I was the only child of an only child that came from these two Welsh women. They had grown up in the same house and moved into the same house when they both married, with their menfolk running the milk business in town. Yes, my grandfather was Morgan the Milk. When their husbands had died, they carried on living together as they had known nothing different. My dad was the spoiled young prince, and so his only daughter was in receipt of a concentration of attention, especially on Christmas Day. And the later part of the afternoon was spent visiting another great aunt who lived nearby, Aunt Min for short, and she was married to Uncle Moll. This man terrified me. He thought that staring wide-eyed and unblinking straight into the eyes of a young child was an acceptable means of communication. If I was lucky, his son and girlfriend, and later wife, would be there to distract and provide alternative entertainment for the older folk. More food and conversation followed, and finally, a sleepy ride home and bed. So went our annual Christmas pilgrimage. Only rarely was there a deviation, and we had Christmas Day in our own home. Such is the power of the Welsh matriarchs.
That was lovely. And I think now we have A Winter's Tale, in part, by Dylan Thomas, read by Susan Jenkins Meers.
This too is a winter's tale, but it is by our very own Dylan Thomas. Notice how I claim it. It is a winter's tale that the snow-blind twilight ferries over the lakes and floating fields from the farm in the cup of the vales, gliding windless through the hand-folded flakes, the pale breath of cattle in a steely sail, and the stars falling cold, and the smell of hay in the snow, and the far owl warning among the folds, and the frozen hold flocked with the sheep, white smoke of the farmhouse cowl, and the river-wended vales where the tale was told. Once when the world turned old, on a star of faith pure as the drifting bread, as the food and flames of the snow, a man unrolled the scrolls of fire that burned in his heart and head, torn and alone in a farmhouse in a fold of fields. And burning then in his firelit island, ringed by the winged snow, and the dung hills white as wool, and the hen roosts sleeping chilled till the flame of the cockcrow combs through the mantled yards, and the morning men stumble out of their spades. The sheep, the cattle stirring, the mousing cats stepping shy, the puffed birds hopping and hunting, the milkmaids gentle in their clogs over the fallen sky, and all the woken farm in its white trades. He knelt, he wept, he prayed, by the spit and the black pot, in the log bright light, in the cup bread in the dancing shade, in the muffled house, in the quick of night, at the point of love, forsaken and afraid.
It's me again. Thank you, Susan. That was lovely. I think it's me. Yes. Okay, this is my memory. Can you all hear me without the... So, Christmas in Newport, Wales, South Wales. Waking up in the early hours of Christmas morning in 1950, a month past our 6th birthday, my twin brother and I eagerly felt for our Christmas stockings on the bedposts behind our heads. Were they full? Had Father Christmas visited in the night? Yes! Oh, joy! That woolly lumpiness promised exciting gifts. We were allowed to switch on the lights and empty our stockings, but not allowed to go downstairs until it was daylight. The female members of the household, Mum, Gran, Aunt, would be up soon enough preparing the Christmas feast before the walk to Mass. This particular Christmas, Mark and I tipped the contents of the stockings onto my eider-downed bed. An orange and an apple each, always, and always discarded. Sweet cigarettes, white sticks of sugar with red tips, licorice pipes, red sprinkles pressed onto the pipe's bowl, fake teeth that you could eat, a rubberized ballerina for me and a Chinese paper fan, toy soldiers for Mark, and a dog whistle. We didn't own a dog. Oh, it was all so wonderful. But this Christmas, disaster struck. Incredibly and unbelievably, Father Christmas had not granted my ardent and sincere wish. This had never happened before. Where was the pony? I had specifically asked for nothing but a pony. Actually, I'd asked for a horse. Ponies are a bit, I had every faith that there would be a horse at the end of my bed, warming himself by the fireplace. Yes, we had fireplaces in the bedrooms in those days in Wales. Coal was our central heating. I just knew my horse was waiting for me to get up and feed him and ride him to Christmas Mass. Well, I did get a horse of sorts, a very nice 10-inch statuette of a glossy brown Morgan. In my 6-year-old awakening common sense, somewhere deep down, I realized the idiocy of believing there could be a horse in my bedroom on that dark Christmas morning. But that flowering common sense had me understanding something much more significant. The many myths debunked during the passage of childhood. The next Christmas, I asked for books from my Aunt Agnes, chocolates from my Gran, and a nurse's outfit from my mother. Father Christmas stayed at the North Pole. Thank you.
Our next reader is, where to go?
Susan Davies Sit again. Another tradition, the Wren's house.
The Wren house of Pembrokeshire was another ritual object carried from house to the accompaniment of verses sung at the door, this time on Twelfth Night. The body of a wren, placed in a small box decorated with ribbons to serve as its funeral parlour, and resting on 4 poles, was borne by 4 men, ostentatiously groaning under the huge weight of their burden. The verses, sometimes sung in the form of question and answer, varied from district to district and often ended, as did so many of these songs, with a request to be allowed into the house. The prolonged Christmas season to which the custom belonged, and the Roman Lupercalia, which preceded it, was associated with the idea of the world turned upside down, its normal behavior and values being temporarily set aside, just as in religion the newborn Christ child in his manger was worshipped as God. So in this secular custom, the tiny wren was treated ceremonially as the king of birds.
The next reader, Janet Palins, very kindly said she would read this, but this is a Christmas memory from my sister-in-law Deleth, who comes from North Wales, and my daughter was going to read it, but she had to leave. So Janet is going to take her place. Thank you very much, Janet. Very nice of you.
No problem. Okay. Can you hear me?
usually pretty loud. Okay, this is Della's Christmas in North Wales. Christmas at my home was very intimate time between just my parents and myself, as I was an only child. All our relatives lived several bus stops away, and many had large families to provide for. Long before Christmas Day, Mom made the Christmas fruit cake on Christmas Eve, and we would put the marzipan and icing on it. It was decorated with pink roses, using the icing gadget thingy, and then enhanced with metallic colored balls. Neither Mom nor I were very skilled decorators. Soon bedtime would approach and time for me to go to bed and be asleep before Santa came. Every year, Mom would give me the latest news about a certain little girl who lived in Welshpool, a neighboring town, who wanted a doll in the worst way, but every year when Santa brought it for her, she was awake, so he couldn't give it to her. This made me very nervous, as at bedtime approached, I would nervously look at the fireplace, afraid Santa would suddenly appear down the chimney. However, luck was always with me, as Santa never caught me awake. In the morning, before opening my eyes, I would feel with my feet for any gifts on my bed. He always put everything at the foot of my bed. Usually he left me a pile of books, always a Hollywood album, a Rupert Annual, and several Enid Blyton books. As I got older, Ellen Montgomery's and of Green Gables books. One year, when I was about 6 years old, I had a pushchair with a doll in it who was decidedly undressed, having only underwear on, but there was a note attached from Santa explaining that he had made a dress and a hat for her, but he made it way too small and hadn't had time to knit another one. And asked if my mother could knit one for her to help him out. And the pink wool was provided. Luckily, my mother was a very good knitter, and she promised it wouldn't take long. I named the doll Jean, and she sits on my bed with these days along with a substitute bear friend, her original friend not having survived. Jean these days wears another knitted dress and a hat that my mother must have knitted sometime in her later years. She does, however, have the original panties and undershirt on. Yay! Christmas Day was a day of listening to the radio, especially to the King and later the Queen's speech, and eating all the Christmas treats. Always sugared almonds and orange and lemon slices, soft jellied candies covered in sugar. Dinner was eaten about 2 p.m. and was usually a roast chicken with sage and onion stuffing and lots of vegetables grown by my father in his garden. Christmas pudding with white sauce would follow. Dad would have a brown ale to drink, and Mom and I would have clear lemonade. Dad would have got them from the local pub, which he went to by bicycle every Saturday night. On his way, he would drop off the wet battery for the radio and pick up a newly charged one. It was quite the feat to safely carry these glass batteries full of acid on a bicycle. It ensured sobriety. This was a typical Christmas in our house. Church was celebrated around the day, but I can't remember going on the actual day. The end.
So we have one more reader, Glyn again. He's going to read a bit of Child's Christmas in Wales by Dylan Thomas. And then after that, I'll pass out song sheets so we can all see deck the hall.
I'm sure, can you hear me okay? I'm sure it won't surprise the men in the audience, but my wife told me I was going to do this about 2 weeks ago, I think, and I forgot. But I just happen to have something in my briefcase, because I'm working on this for something else. So hopefully I can read this okay. Child's Christmas in Wales. One Christmas was so much like another. In those years around the sea-town corner now, out of all sound, except the distant speaking of the voices I sometimes hear a moment before sleep, that I can never remember whether it snowed for 6 days and 6 nights when I was 12, or whether it snowed for 12 days and 12 nights when I was 6. All the Christmases rolled down towards the two-ton sea like a cold and headlong moon bundling down the sky that was our street. And they stopped at the rim of the ice-edged fish-freezing waves. And I plunge my hands in the snow and bring out whatever I can find. In goes my hand into that wool-white bell-tongued ball of holidays, resting at the rim of the carol-singing sea, and out come Mrs. Prothero and the firemen. It was on the afternoon of the day of Christmas Eve, and I was in Mrs. Prothero's garden, waiting for cats with her son Jim. It was snowing. It was always snowing at Christmas. December in my memory is white as Lapland, where there were no reindeers, but there were cats. Patient, cold and callous, our hands wrapped in socks, we waited to snowball the cats. Sleek and long as jaguars, and horrible whiskered, spitting and snarling, they would slide and sidle over the white back garden walls. And the lynx-eyed hunters, Jim and I, fur-capped and moccasined trappers from Hudson Bay, off Mumbles Road, would hurl out deadly snowballs at the green of their eyes. The wise cats never appeared. We were so still, Eskimo-footed Arctic marksmen in the muffling silence of the eternal snows, eternal ever since Wednesday, that we never heard Mrs. Prothero's first cry from her igloo at the bottom of the garden. Or if we heard it at all, it was to us like the far-off challenge of our enemy and prey, the neighbours' polar cats. But soon the voice grew louder. Fire! And she beat the dinner gong. And we ran down the garden with the snowballs in our arms towards the house, and smoke indeed was pouring out of the dining room, and the gong was bombulating, and Mrs. Prothero was announcing ruin, like a town crier in Pompeii. This was better than all the cats in Wales, standing on the wall in a row. We bounded into the house, laden with snowballs, and stopped at the open door of the smoke-filled room. Something was burning all right. Perhaps it was Mr. Prothero, who always slept there after midday dinner with a newspaper over his face. But he was standing in the middle of the room saying, "A fine Christmas, a fine Christmas," and smacking at the smoke with a slipper. "Call the fire brigade," cried Mrs. Prothero as she beat the gong. "They won't be there," said Mr. Prothero. "It's Christmas." There was no fire to be seen, only clouds of smoke, and Mr. Prothero standing in the middle of them, waving his slipper as though he were conducting the Welsh orchestra. "Do something," he said, and we threw all our snowballs into the smoke. I think we missed Mr. Prothero and ran out of the house to the telephone box. "Let's call the police as well, and the ambulance, and Ernie Jenkins, he likes fires." But we only called the fire brigade, and soon the fire engine came, and 3 tall men in helmets brought a hose into the house, and Mr. Prothero got out just in time before they turned it on. Nobody could have had a noisier Christmas Eve. And when the fireman turned off the hose and was standing in the wet, smoky room, Jim's aunt, Miss Prothero, came downstairs and peered in at them. Jim and I waited very quietly to hear what she would say to them. She said the right thing always. She looked at the 3 tall firemen in their shining helmets, standing among the smoke and cinders and dissolving snowballs, and she said, "Would you like anything to read?"
So all going to give
Tis the season to be jolly, fa la